There's been a lot of talk recently about the potential rise of fascism in America. To contextualize this, it's essential to delve into the history of fascism and understand its defining characteristics. This helps us decide whether movements like MAGA and Trumpism deserve to be labeled as fascist. A critical reference point for this discussion comes from a U.S. Army pamphlet published during World War II when fascism was at its peak. This pamphlet, part of the Army Talk series, was intended to educate soldiers about the ideology they were fighting against. On March 24, 1945, the Army published a pamphlet specifically addressing fascism. It described fascism as difficult to identify and analyze and even harder to eradicate once in power. It stressed the importance of understanding the causes and practices of fascism to combat it effectively. The pamphlet defined fascism as government by the few and for the few. Its objective is the complete seizure and control of the economic, political, social, and cultural life of the state. While democratic governments are run by the people, fascist governments run the people. This distinction resonates with slogans and rhetoric from Donald Trump, such as "I alone can fix it" or "I am your voice." Promises of quick fixes to crime, violence, and economic issues echo the themes of authoritarian control and manipulation. The pamphlet highlights that fascists fundamentally oppose democracy. Democracy, with its principles of civil liberties and equality before the law, stands as an obstacle to fascists who aim to consolidate power among an elite few. Consequently, fascists suppress civil liberties, reject equality, and impose rigid societal roles. For example, the Nazi slogan for women was "children, kitchen, and the church," relegating women to subservient roles. Similarly, recent rhetoric in the U.S. has pushed traditionalist views, advocating for women to return to domestic roles. Prominent figures have even claimed that feminism is harmful and argued for a return to family structures where women are confined to homemaking. The pamphlet underscores that fascists use force and propaganda to maintain power. This propaganda often hinges on primitive ideas of blood, race, fear, and hate. Trump's statements, such as calling immigrants from Africa and Asia poison to the nation's purity, align with this pattern. Such rhetoric mirrors historical fascist propaganda, which glorified war and promoted pitiless violence. Further, fascists exploit patriotism to mask their intentions, wrapping themselves in the flag to gain popular support. They engage in divisive hate campaigns targeting minorities, religions, and other marginalized groups. Trump's policies and statements, such as advocating for the largest deportation program in history and labeling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, exemplify this divisiveness. The pamphlet outlines three main techniques used by fascists to consolidate power. Divide and conquer. Fascists pit social, political, religious, and economic groups against each other, orchestrating hate campaigns to weaken unity. Recent examples include inflammatory remarks about immigrants, minorities, and political opponents. Reject international cooperation. Fascists promote ultranationalism, fostering hatred and suspicion towards other nations. Trump's America First rhetoric, along with criticism of international allies and organizations, reflects this mindset. Frame opponents as communists. Fascists label dissenters as communists, a tactic to delegitimize opposition. Trump's frequent use of terms like socialist to attack progressive policies fits this mold. The pamphlet warns that fascists present themselves as saviors of democracy while actively working to undermine it. Trump's repeated claims of taking back our country and rebuilding American pride echo this deceptive strategy. Lastly, the pamphlet emphasizes that combating fascism requires vigilance. It thrives on ignorance and indifference. Protecting freedom means safeguarding the rights of all individuals and opposing discrimination, prejudice, and hate. When we allow these forces to undermine the rights of others, our own freedom is at risk. The evidence of Trump's adherence to these patterns is substantial. According to his first wife, Ivana Trump, he kept a book of Hitler's speeches by his bedside. While Trump's reading habits may be questionable, this anecdote underscores his apparent admiration for authoritarian playbooks. Ultimately, the U.S. Army's definition of fascism from World War II provides a clear framework for analyzing contemporary movements. With its emphasis on propaganda, divisive rhetoric, and the subversion of democracy, Trumpism exhibits many hallmarks of fascism. It's up to the American people to decide whether they will heed history's warnings or allow these patterns to take root in their democracy.